Innovation is not just happening in the finance industry, but also in the long-time industry, real estate. According to Zhang Xin, who is a co-founder and CEO of SOHO China, she talked about the innovative approach that her industry is now using, particularly with the recent business model. She also talks about what it takes when it comes to innovation to build real good new buildings with new ideas in China and beyond. Tian, welcome to World Insight with Tian Wei.
Good to see you, Tian Wei.
Good to see you here. They say innovation is in the air.
Should we smell it?
Can you do that? Innovation is a great idea. It seems far away from your industry, real estate.
Real estate innovation, for the longest part, has been doing architecture design, building new buildings, and then also lately is about embracing the green buildings and, you know, injecting these sustainability elements into the buildings. Those are all innovations, right? And of course, for us now, we actually have a new product that is also a real estate innovation. So what happened is, in the last 20 years, we've built a lot of buildings in China. Almost all the cities are filled with the best buildings. And some of the buildings are not fully occupied. And yet, some of the smaller companies have the need, and they don't really have the means to rent the space for 3 years, 5 years, renovate them. So we came up with a new product called SOHO 3Q, which is really to share the office space by many startup companies. And that is a new way, an innovative way of working.
Well, it is, but its competition is also fierce. So I understand there's something called we work, your work, and they even compete against each other on the IPR issue sometime earlier ago. So I guess this is quite a competitive field. It's not like earlier when you jump into the real estate. It's still like a blue ocean, as they say, at that time.
You know, Tian Wei, you remember in the peak of the competition for real estate, we had over 50,000 developers. 50,000 developers in China. The competition was fierce. Today, I think the sharing economy on the real estate side, on the sharing office side, it's not nearly as competitive as those days when we were building buildings. And let's say that we have moved from building buildings to actually create the content inside the buildings. And so actually it's healthy to have the competition. Just remember that, you know, it's not a bad thing to have fierce competition which would enable us, each of us, to come up with a better product, better service, would benefit the market.
As long as it is based on the rules.
Right. The rules itself are also being developed.
Innovated at the same time, because they really need to catch up with the technological and the thoughts.
Right.
Having said that, though, you've been embracing something called light asset. This is one of those examples. But overall, how has that campaign been? I mean, you have buildings everywhere in China. So much asset. What is the process? How about the pace of it?
Right.
Security vis-a-vis innovation.
If you go to Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, the vacancies are not that much, not that high. So you don't actually feel there's a lot of empty buildings. But actually, when you go down to Tier 2, Tier 3 cities, there seem to be more vacancies there. And therefore, people like us have been thinking about, what do we need to do to really increase the occupancy? Who can be the tenants that right now are underserviced? They're not in the buildings. Can we get them in? How do we get them in these buildings? So the easiest way is to do this share economy, the co-working space. So that if you're a company of 10 people or 20 people, you don't really have to worry about signing a long lease, renovation. You just need to come in, sign a lease of 1 day or 1 week or 1 month. And if you don't like it, a week later, if you have more needs, need bigger space, we can change instantly. So I think that's actually, you will see that many of these companies otherwise wouldn't have been working in this type of buildings.
But you know, from structure, That is what you are doing with the real estate, to now the content. This transformation for you is a learning process too.
Right.
How is it being so far?
Well, we didn't used to know so many startups, for instance, right? Now, if you walk into any SOHO 3Qs, you will see hundreds of them.
Are you investing in some of them?
No, we haven't. You know, we're very disciplined on, we're just doing the real estate, and we're providing office space for these companies. We don't really have the ability to judge, are they good in what they're doing? So we don't do that. But in seeing these companies, they're so young and startups, and it's actually
the energy
is so high, right? And then actually it's amazing if you get a chance to see any of the 3Qs, you get really, it's a contagious energy.
Talking about the energy, you brought in a lot of energy to China's real estate as well. But working, for example, with Zaha Hadid, was a tough process I learned from you.
That's right. Yeah, you remember that.
You brought in innovative ideas as a result. Tell me about that process, you know, the working process.
Well, you know, in every industry, there's element of innovation, right? It's not like only digitalization is innovation. You know, even if in this environment, I can think about many ways to be more innovative. So I think when I look at when we build buildings, you know, what are the things that I can bring in to make it different, to make it, so that's innovation, right? And so then architecture, art, you know, beautiful buildings is the first thing came to my mind, because I just remember these buildings form the face of a city. And it's important that we bring the best of the class to China to do this. And my 14 years working, collaborating with Zaha Hadid was the best and the most productive and the most memorable experience.
You wrote a letter even on the news that she passed away, very emotional letter. But I understand during the process, as an observer, it was not easy. The question is, when do you know it is innovation? How to bring it in so that the other party would also work with you?
For instance, let me give you a small story about working with Zaha Hadid. She, before China, most of her work was in a much smaller scale, right? I mean, that's generally the case with real estate. Only China's scale is so big, right? So she was very focused on using innovative material to do building. So when I started working with her, I told her, look, if we bring your design language to this scale, that itself is innovation. We don't need to be thinking about every little materials, every single bit needs to be innovative. If we do that, we actually would give ourselves so many troubles by finishing this building, because these buildings are so big, right? So let's think about how do we create this design in this mega scale of China, and yet still to be able to produce in China by the Chinese worker and with the Chinese material.
Pragmatism meets innovation.
Right, so that's the result is what you can see, all these amazing Zaha Hadid designed buildings, right?
Yeah. Final question, very briefly. What does it take to have real innovation, no matter which field?
I really think that we live in the changing environment, right, and more than ever. And the innovation really comes from, first, our own observation, as in what is changing and what is needed in the market. So I think to observe what's needed and then come up with a product that fits that demand, that itself is the process of innovation.